Hey guys, welcome to Traditional Bow Hunting Wilderness Podcast. Jason Sam Kovac here. Today we're going to talk about my arrow componentry and how I set them up. We're going to break it down in detail. I get a lot of questions about my inserts, a lot of questions about how I build my arrows, and a lot of questions about my fletching. So we're going to cover that today. So what we have here is on the bench, I have some of the components that I use. Now, first off, feather-wise, any feathers are going to work good. I buy mine in full length, okay? These are full-length left wing feathers that I use. I usually use this color for all my hunting stuff. These ones I use for, practice stuff, things like that. But I buy them in full length. And then I am chopping them on a Three Rivers little chopper. Now you can see, if you look at this, I reground that out and drop that down so far down so that I get a high back type feather out of there. You can see that that's the feather that's coming out, is an actual high back type feather is what we have coming out of this. So like I said, by modifying that a touch, I make that feather taller. I like a taller feather. This is about what it looks like in perspective. Right there, it's about a 3.5 inch high back feather compared to, if you want to look at, to a 5.5 inch high back feather. You can see the difference here. So you can see that it's a little bit shorter, but this is what we used to use back in the day. This is what I use now, is a 3.5 inch high back left wing helical feather on there is what I actually use. Let's throw this one back up here. It's just a spare arrow. But with that said, so that's how I chop them. I use a Three Rivers chopper. I kind of modified that as much as I could to get the height out of the back of this feather to give me that shape I want. This is a 4-inch, and then I cut off about a 1/4 inch off the end of that that's sticking out there. And then I always, if you look closely, you can see I trim with scissors. You can see how that's got rid of that hard edge on the front of that. I do that right, see if we can get it to stand, but that hard edge right there, I take that off with a pair of scissors so that if that fletch runs across the top of my hand, that corner doesn't catch me. But that's how I run my feathers on there. Scissors, like I said, just to chop it, because as you can see on here, the back does pretty good, but the front sometimes leaves a little piece on there, and like I said, I cut that back to about this far here when I'm done. So that's what I do. I use a simple 4-inch feather chopper for chopping my feathers. Shaft-wise, I use gold tip blems. Some of you guys are going to be like, well, those are 500 spine. How are you going to use a 500 spine out of your bow? They're going to be way too soft. Oh my God, you're going to blow your bow up. No, these work perfect for me, and I'll explain why, and it'll make sense in a minute. These are also here. These are a 400 that I was experimenting with some different inserts and head weights and stuff. I don't think I'll buy these anymore just because I think I want to go with black, so I think I'm going to buy these Victories, these Victory Sports. Probably going to still stay in a 500. These are 400s, and I was experimenting with them, and I'm going to stay with the green and how I normally do, but I like the black shaft, and you can see here, it's got all the logoing on it. There, I sanded that off with some quick sandpaper real fast. I like this better, and it's quieter on my shelf. So next time, when I'm going to make these arrows, but maybe next year, the year after, when I need to make more arrows, I'm probably going to go black shaft like that is probably what I'm going to end up doing here, so that there you go. So that's probably the route I'm going to go. Nock-wise, I love gold tip nocks. These nocks are phenomenal. They've never broke on me. They don't pop off. They don't give me a hard time. I know nocks are nocks to a lot of people, but no big deal. But to me, gold tip nocks are absolutely incredible. If they fit in there tight, they work good, and I like them. So I got hundreds of these, and I love them. So I use the gold tip nocks. I do use just cap wraps on mine. Again, I don't have one of my arrows actually out here. It would be like this. Here's a broken one, but that is what my arrows normally look like. Right there, again, that same 3.5 inch high back feather, but that's what they look like. But I use a yellow cap wrap, and then I just use a red red Sharpie marker to put to put this cresting on here. That's why it's kind of smeared. It's just a Sharpie marker, but that's what I do there, and I just roll these on with a mouse pad. I take that, lay it on the mouse pad, roll it across. It makes it nice and easy. No bubbles, no bad spots, no nothing. Works really good. Makes those come in nice and clean. Now, insert-wise, why these work for me, remember, I have a 26-inch draw, and I'm cutting a 27-inch arrow, okay? Short little arrow. Let's put that into perspective compared to that full-length shaft there, all right? Let that sink in. I mean, now take into consideration, these are what I shoot for inserts, okay? This is how I make it. It is 2 inserts, 200-grain inserts like that. They go back to back. I grind off this head on my bench grinder. I've shown you videos. I use that grinder to grind off the head so that they end up like this. And then this, sometimes I got to use this drill bit, sometimes I don't, but it depends. But if the bottom hole in these is, some of the manufacturers are a little too tight, but I try to get this to fit into that hole. And basically what I do is I take that pin, I put it into here, and then put that one there, and I put them together on there, and then I use these 2 punches, and I smash that pin over inside there so it bubbles on both ends, and it keeps these locked together so that can't come apart. And then when I glue them, they stay even better. But that is my insert. So that is a double insert that goes into here, so you can see why a 500 spine arrow works for me when you see the total weights. Look at how long my insert is on that arrow. So it takes my 27-inch arrow down to 24 inches of flexible dynamic shaft because I have 3 inches of insert inside there that won't flex. Now, if you don't want to make those inserts, there are people out there now that make 200 grain inserts finally. This one I got on Amazon. They're dirt cheap, 200 grain on Amazon, brass ones. And then these are Ethics Archeries that I got from Jason over at Toughhead, 200 grain stainless steel. These are amazing, but they are expensive. The other issue I have right now, why I'm not using them, is if you look at the length, if we line those up head to head, you can see that mine are quite a bit longer, so I'm afraid using this would affect my spine right now. So I'm still currently using these, but when I switch over to these arrows, which was why I was experimenting with a 400, is because of that shorter length on there, may make a 400 work better for me. So we'll see. But that is my insert setup that I use to give me my 200 grain insert. And then for my heads, or fletching wise, I use Jojen mono fletchers. I know everybody say, oh, it's not a Bitzenberger. I've had 5 Bitzenbergers in my life, and I cannot get them to fletch right for me to save my butt. I don't know why. These work really good. These are what I use, your Jojen multi-fletcher. You can see this one's about 28 years old. Still works. I did have to put that little spring clamp on there to kind of keep it held together better, but it works fantastic. Here's another one right here, and this one I just happened to buy. Somebody had that available, and I found it on social media and bought it. Haven't even opened it yet. But a left wing. So those are my fletching tools that I use. They just really work good for me. I use grain scales, check my weights on everything when I'm all said and done. And then for the heads, I run, these are what I'm running now. These are what I ran for many, many years, these Magnus heads. And I would put them on a 100 grain steel insert or adapter, would go right in there like that. That's what I would run. These, because these are a 210 grain head already, I'm putting them on a 47 grain aluminum one to give me, so this head equals the same weight as this head. My judo is 135 grains on a 100 grain, same thing, 100 grain steel adapter in there, which means that all 3 of these heads have the same weight. That's important for me. So on my arrows, I can run this head, or keep this in my quiver, and they are all flying exactly the same because they are the same weight heads. That's very, very important for me that I have that set up. So that's why I like the things. Now, and people are going to go, well, that's weak. That aluminum one is weak. That's not going to work. Well, I put 3 of these heads through shoulders, completely through both shoulders on deer this year, including hogs, and I have never bent, never had a failure, never nothing. Now, the broadhead that went through both of those shoulders on that deer was pretty dinged up, and chipped up, and, it was in pretty rough condition. I fixed it, made it good, but this insert never has given me a fit. And I've killed a lot of animals over the years with these, including caribou and bear and all kinds of stuff. So don't let anybody tell you these aren't that strong and that they don't work. They work fantastic. I've never had a problem with them. They do good. Would I rather use steel? Yes, I would. But on the same note, they don't have a steel one that would work for that. Now, I could go with a lighter the 75 grainers, where are those? Right here. Here's a 75 grain. But look at this. Okay, look at the length of that. Look at how much shorter that 75 grain is on there. I don't want that shorter length. I'd much rather have all that extra length up in there. So I'd rather use this than this, personally. If I can't use one of these, then I'm quite content going with one of these rather than using this personally. So all personal preference. That's just, to each your own, and whatever you feel and you want to use, and, your whatever works best for you. But that is my setup. That is how and then for my chopper, hammer right here, because I put my feathers on there, hit this, bam, that's how I chop them, spits out a feather. So that's what my arrow components are. That's what makes up my arrow setup that would typically look very much like this arrow here. Give you an example. Here's a perfect example, all right? This is the arrow that went through that deer. Okay, this is the arrow that went through that deer. It didn't go all the way through, but this is the one that busted both those shoulders. This was running this head. Okay, that head with that setup, one of these. My insert is bent. Okay, I can't even put a head in there anymore. That's why I'm throwing this one out, because I might be able to try and get it out of there. But see how that insert is bent? The insert itself bent before this aluminum bent. This whole thing here bent. May it have been better if it had the steel in there? I don't know, but this whole insert system in there is what actually tweaked and bent from that whole thing, rather than actually that, you know, the head was completely fine. I pulled it out and it was completely good and all set. That was the problem right there. So just something to consider. But that's my setup. That's what I'm using. That's the arrows that I build and how I build them and the components I use on them. Hopefully it shows you something, gives you some pointers and ideas. What I do, I've done videos on making arrows. I take these, this was one of my concept ideas that I was thinking about doing, because I do bust up fletching so often that I hate replacing and stripping off the cap wraps. I'm thinking about going with a wrap like this, where then I don't have to remove this wrap to refletch the arrow. That's why that one looks like that. I got all kinds of stuff I'm tinkering and kicking ideas around with, but this is my current setup, and how I make it and what I do ends up coming out to be a 710 grain arrow. Gives me a 710 grain arrow with 30.8% FOC is what I end up getting out of this, with 450 grains up front. So kind of gives you a perspective of it. It punches bullet holes out of my bows, my 57-pound hill-style longbows, and my 26-inch draw. 26 inches on a good day. Usually I'm about 25 and a half, right about 25 and a half, 26 inches. So those work flawless for me. That's why I picked them. The fletching size has been tested and tested and tested. Again, we went, it used to be where I would shoot. You can see them up there. In the old days, this 5.5 inch high back feather like this was what we shot all the time. And then over time, I did all this experimenting to end on a 3-inch or 3.5 inch high back. I went to 3-inch, I went to 2.5 inch, I went to 2-inch, I went to a non-high back 4-inch, I went to 4 fletch. I tried everything, and I tested them in the rain, I tested them in the wind, I tested them everywhere. I like high back because I get this ball effect when this thing's spinning, okay? Because it's so big of feathers. I like seeing that big yellow golf ball fly towards the target. So I want high back. This size fletching, for me, is the best. It's very forgiving of my failures. It recovers quickly. It handles great in the rain. It doesn't, mat down too bad, and it still flies well. Everything about this fletching was picked on purpose. It wasn't a random decision to go with a 4-inch cut down to a 3.5 inch high back. It was not by mistake. All of this stuff was meticulously tested and figured out in what works best for me. So, like I said, hopefully that gives you some ideas, some pointers. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you soon. All right, bye.